Thanks for making the effort, despite the rain. I'm going to invite the panel to come and take their seats as soon as they're all mic'd up at the back there. In the meantime, I'm just going to just say a couple of words from us, High Space, and I'll welcome up the venue hosts, Carlos, and also the catering. Alex from Social Pantry is going to come up in a few moments, just say a quick welcome as well. I'm sure you've all just been enjoying all the delicious food. Sorry, I'm a little out of breath. I've just trekked from the back of the room and I haven't gone to the gym in a while. I just want to say we've got a few surveys you probably picked up on your seats. If you've not got a pen, we're running around our staff with some pens in the break. We'd love it if you would just fill out the surveys. It's just really, it's really helpful to share ideas with one another and makes us be able to sort of continuously improve as a group. And I think, it would be great for you to kind of give us your 2 cents on those. There's also some other sort of slides. Feel free to read those as well. Initially, I want to thank all of our sponsors. Obviously, we've got this amazing venue today, Lumiere. I don't know how many of you have been here before. It's just quite a breathtaking space. There's multiple spaces here, so I'm sure you'll get a quick run through in a few minutes from Carlos. Also want to thank, obviously, our caterers, Social Pantry, for all the great food. We've also got our branding sponsors who have put up all the branding today. Vinyl Impression, they're around on site today. We also have London Film, who are here doing all the filming and some photography this morning as well. And Noodle Live, who did the registration this morning. I'll get started. We do have a LinkedIn group, which I think you've all been invited to. It's just a nice discussion forum for everyone. We'll actually be doing a nice write-up about today's event, all the outcomes from the discussion, and the workshop later as well, sharing slides and that sort of thing. So feel free, it'd be great for you to have as many of you as possible joining that discussion group, and we'll be putting information out there continuously over the coming months. I'd like to first welcome Carlos up from Lumiere, who right here, who's just going to welcome you from the venue. Alex will follow, and then we'll move on to Calum Lieto, who will be moderating our panel this morning. Thanks very much.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming to my studio. As you might have heard, I'm Carlos, and I'm from Spain. I'm a fashion photographer, and I started, I'm in London since 2000, and I get 11 studios in London in all this time. This is my last studios here, and I met Higher Space when they started, like 4 years ago, maybe 4 years. And since the beginning, they've been very helpful in finding me clients. So I want to help to thank them. Also, EventLAB, which I attended last time, was very good and positive for us. And if you have any questions about my venue, I will be around. So thank you. And I pass you to...
Thanks, Hi, good morning, happy Friday. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Alex and I own and run Social Pantry. We are an events and contract catering company and we now have 7 sites across London. So we are in-house at Loft Studios, we've got a cafe in Battersea, we've just opened the first all-women's members club called Albright in Tottenham Court Road, and we've actually really excitingly just won a tender out in Ealing where we are now the proud owners of the tender of Pitshanger Manor, which is great. So London for us is a really exciting place to be for food at the moment, and what makes Social Pantry unique are a couple of things. One is that we like to stay ahead of the food trends. We like to think that some of the food trends we set, but we're absolutely kind of loving like the sustainability movement. We're loving like the purple foods. We're loving kind of the pasta coming back. So all sorts of that kind of keeps our menus really current and quite forward thinking. But the other aspect of my company, which I'm really proud of, is that 10% of my workforce are ex-offenders. So we employ gentlemen that are currently in prison and get released every day and come to some of my sites. We go into prisons and interview gentlemen that are about to be released, and then when they get released, we then employ them. So I'm really proud of that. Any questions on that, give me a shout. We've got Chloe and Jess here from Social Pantry, so kind of any catering inquiries or event inquiries or contract catering inquiries, we're here for you. Enjoy the food, happy Friday, have a great weekend.
Hello? Yes. Hello everyone, I'm Calum Lieto, the editor of C&IT magazine. So I'll be moderating the panel discussion today. We've got 4 great speakers with us, and I'm just going to ask you, sorry, just slowly, slowly drifting over there. I'll just ask you to briefly introduce yourselves and kind of your involvement with what you do and that. So.
Charlotte Gentry, founder and CEO of Pure Events. We've been going for about 15 years. We produce international global conference and incentives.
I'm Kate Kelly from Fisher Productions. So we are a full-service production agency. I'm one of the account directors there. We do about 450 events a year, and we do venue finding, but also sit on a number of lists as an approved supplier also.
Hi, I'm Natalie Davies. I'm from ITV Experiences. So across the business, we run around 150 events, anything from sort of dinner parties to large-scale productions, shows and things like that, very ITV. So we book directly with venues, but we also use event finding agencies as well for a lot of our events.
And I'm Victoria Monks. I work for Sense, which is a charity. So I've been working in the charity sector for the last 5 years doing fundraising events.
So the aim of today is really to find out what it is behind these individuals' minds that makes them consider a venue, and the kind of the decision-making process behind that, the bugbears and also the things that they really enjoy. So I guess just to start off, that's fine, this is good. What's kind of a bugbear? Like what really winds you up about a venue? Don't feel too hurt by these sentiments. But the idea, this is a learning process. So yeah, if we just start with you, because I keep touching your chair.
So for me, one of the things that's frustrating is when if you're dealing with a sales team, and then when you come to then talk to the ops team, some of the things that you might have agreed aren't necessarily what can happen when it comes to the event. So you might have gone further with a venue that actually, when it comes to putting it together, you can't quite achieve what you had envisioned. So that's a bit of a bugbear, that sometimes the communication between the teams isn't always great.
I think, completely agree, that transition from salesperson to operationally on the day sometimes is a bit jarred and could be smoother in certain situations. I think for us personally, I think it's really important that we get full transparency over costs and inclusions and exclusions, and that there are no nasty surprises. Once we've sold it into our stakeholders, I think it's important that we know everything and the full story, and there aren't any surprises.
Yeah, I think similarly for us as a production agency, obviously we're bringing in a lot of equipment often, we're building bespoke items, so knowing exactly what you can and can't do within that space from the offset is obviously key for us. When we're venue finding for our clients, we often have to advise in terms of what you can and can't do, so it's really embarrassing for us sometimes further down the line if you've kind of sold in a particular build or set design and then suddenly further down the line you can't do that. And also with additional costs. So for us, often we're looking after the whole budget for the client. So if we then have to sneak in an additional cost at the end, we need to be able to back that up. So transparency is key from us right from the start.
I think really the biggest issue is that when you go on site visits is that you have the salesperson who takes you on the site inspection, and actually you need the salesperson there and you need the ops person there, because you need to understand from the very beginning exactly what's possible and what's not. And often you are in a scenario where somebody's desperately trying to sell you the space, but actually it just doesn't work for various reasons, and you're not being given 100% the true picture of actually what's possible. So in actual fact, you need both sides of the equation there from the offset, really. Otherwise, you just encounter larger problems down the road, and we found ourselves in an embarrassing situation where the venue have misguided us over information, and actually even some of that information's been misguided even on brochures. When we've actually been sent the information electronically, it's actually not been correct. Where we've then had to go back to our clients and say, really sorry, but actually we've just been informed of X, Y, and Z, and that puts us in a terribly difficult position, because we then have to navigate our way out of that, and we shouldn't really have to in the first instance.
It sounds like the common thread really is communication, and then also having that relationship where it's less transactional and more sort of consultative from the very beginning. But what can be done to maybe improve that? Because it sounds like that's a common issue that's obviously occurring a lot. And how can that be improved? How can that be developed? How can the people in the audience think, oh, that's what I need to do to benefit more? Is there?
I think education, actually, in terms of, and it does boil back down to communication, but actually generic education throughout the entire team. If there's a, we don't necessarily know what kind of internal meetings happen within venues to actually educate the people that are selling the space, as well as actually really understanding the delivery aspects. And so often you find that the person that you're talking to on the end of the phone from the ops side doesn't really 100% know the ins and outs of where the plug sockets are in the room, how that particular set design is actually going to work. And therefore, we find that we might be, in fact, needing to educate the venue with certain scenarios that we feel that we shouldn't really have to, because the venue should already understand absolutely categorically inside and out exactly how that room will work.
What about with the new venues? So obviously there's a big hunger and a big appetite for these new venues that you've never been to before and things like that. So there's naturally going to be some sort of teething problems where maybe they aren't as experienced at having every kind of event in the space. Is there a level of sort of acceptance, like, okay, fair enough, or do you think that there should still be a very, very thorough level of education way before they even go live?
I think it's fine if they say they don't know, and then you can actually
You'd
bring in.
almost rather that,
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
I think it's much better if they say we're not totally sure how that's going to work, or we don't really know how that's going to look. We haven't done it before, and then we can bring in. So, for instance, we're a production agency, so we would probably go along with our client, and we would ask questions and see whether or not we could do that there and then with potentially their whole team or whoever it is who'd be overseeing that on the event. I think it's more being led down the garden path and kind of finding out later down the line that what you've been promised isn't achievable.
Comes back to that transparency.
Yeah.
So it's instead of trying to hoodwink and trying to kind of trick you into saying yes, we'll go with you, it's just saying right from the start, okay, we don't know this, we can do this is our limitation, and then going from there. Again, I'm assuming that's the same with costs, because I think you mentioned earlier about sometimes there being hidden costs later down the line when you're already way committed. Has there been a scenario or multiple scenarios? Is this a common occurrence that this happens?
So something that's always crops up is something as crazy as Wi-Fi, where you find out that, and we do a lot of international conferencing, so we'll find out that the venue want to charge a per head cost over the course of 3 days per delegate for Wi-Fi, which quite frankly should now 100% be included in the cost of what you're paying for. And these things should be absolutely highlighted from the offset, rather than then coming up against something like that, which if you're dealing with 600 people for a conference in Rome or something, it's a significant cost over a 3-day period of time. It can equate to thousands of pounds, which the client hasn't accounted for. And again, it's just it puts everybody in a bit of a difficult situation.
I had a similar experience with cleaning. Actually, cleaning wasn't included. We had a 3-day build. It was a dry hire space, so there's some differences with dry hire spaces, but it just wasn't accounted for and wasn't flagged. And suddenly, after 2 days worth of men going in and out, women going in and out, you needed to clean the toilets, and that was something that we were expected to organise and then pay for as well. So that was a hidden cost that we weren't expecting.
Bizarre hidden cost.
It was really strange.
You wouldn't expect that.
No.
What about yourself?
Well, yeah, so for me, working in the charity sector, when we come across hidden costs, it makes a big difference, because that's money that we're then having to spend on the event that isn't going towards the people that we're supposed to be raising money to help. So yeah, the transparency is really important for us.
And then on the agency side, you've also then got a client to manage at the same time. So it's like another degree of communication and issues, things like that. So it'd be interesting to hear from the corporate side and the agency side on this. But how do you, if the venue's been completely transparent, but say things like with commissions and other costs and things like that, how do you then continue that transparency all through that relationship so that there isn't any issues throughout that entire line of communication. So I guess from your side, when you are working with third parties, what's your preferences?
So we are the budget holders for our projects, and we have a responsibility to make sure that the budget that we've been given by our stakeholders, internal stakeholders, doesn't increase or doesn't go over. If it does, we then have to justify that cost. So if we get given a hidden cost or an increase in the budget that we then can't, we do have to explain it to the stakeholder or ask for more money, which there never is. So it puts us in a really, really tricky situation. So it's really, really key to have that communication.
You're both chomping at the bit. It's okay. We'll get to both.
I mean, obviously you've touched on the most recent issue about commission structures, which are changing with regards to the likes of Marriott and Hilton having reduced their commissions, and what it's done is it's meant that within the industry, agencies are having to relook at remodeling their structure basically and being a lot more transparent, which is something that we absolutely do anyway. So we have a time-based model, and our time is logged on time-based software. So we charge a fee for the services that we deliver. So it's completely transparent. Everything that we do is completely broken down. So we don't have any of these issues of hiding how much commission we're making from venues, because actually we're completely open to disclosing it to our clients, who are actually able then to reutilise that commission against future services actually that we are able to offer them. So we've looked at remodelling that with this particular new concern and issue in the forefront of people's minds. So I think the whole venue finding model is absolutely having to change now, because clients don't know how much commission their agencies are taking, and they could be doing 2 hours work and gaining £12,000 worth of commission for that. So I think there's a big call in the industry, client side, to make that information readily available.
Yeah, we work in various different ways to kind of flex towards our clients. So some clients we actually work on a kind of open book basis. And we'll be completely transparent with our costs. Obviously, we offer a service, and we also do bespoke build and kit, so those things cost. So they can obviously see what those items are, and everything's line itemed in terms of how we charge. So something that we're also looking at doing is charging for our time more openly. So we are now reducing our actual physical service costs and actually charging more for our time, because what we've realised is that's the most valuable part of our business. But obviously, when it comes to the venue and those costs, again, we don't mark those up, we just put those in. So it means that when there are those additional costs, we don't have any slush fund to kind of support that. We actually had a situation a couple of years ago on an event where it wasn't in the contract and it wasn't flagged that we had to do an asbestos survey at the venue, which is completely unheard of. You wouldn't expect to walk into a venue and check if there's asbestos in the roof. So that was an additional cost, which in the end we had to kind of half with the client. So again, transparency is really key, but we will obviously try and be as transparent with our clients on the other end.
And what do you think the future is for the new commissions? Do you think it's, obviously going from 10% to 7% was a big thing for Marriott, then Hilton jumped on board, and it seems like the bigger hotel chains will probably do that. But do you think across the entire industry, commissions will just eventually disappear and there just won't be any commissions at all, or it will just maybe get lower, or how do you see that going forward? Because obviously you were talking about changing your models, and do you think that that's the future now, and that commissions will eventually just...
I think the heavy reliability on the commission-only model, essentially most venue finding agencies are providing a free service. There is no such thing as a free lunch, right? So, at the end of the day, this service is probably no longer going to be free. That's the bottom line. It will be a nominal fee charge service based on time of actually doing the research and coming up with the right solutions to suit that client brief. Which means everybody knows exactly 100% where they are. It's probably become more of a retainer-based model, with commissions that are being earned being added to that pot of money that the client's paying, and then being able to utilise those commissions. So I don't think commissions are going to completely vanish, because I think that would be quite unusual or take quite a long time for that model to completely change. However, I don't think venue finding agencies are going to be able to survive on the commission-based model alone, and will be forced to be a lot more transparent with actually where their revenues are coming from.
And I guess with you, because you said you work with venue finding partners in this instance, I personally feel that in a way it's a good thing, because it means that the decisions will be less maybe biased. You know, they won't be going, okay, well, we suggest that ITV puts your event here because we're going to get paid the most. And actually that it might become back to that consultative aspect, where they say, okay, so your event is trying to achieve this, this and this. Well, this venue actually ticks all of those boxes regardless of how much money I'm getting from it. So do you think that there might be a more positive change in terms of the kind of venue choices and things?
Yeah, there could be. I think that definitely makes sense. I think it will affect our bottom line regardless. So that will be the main effect on us sort of as the client. Because, yeah, there's no such thing as a free service, so they need to get the money from somewhere. So that's probably the impact on us.
I think also agencies are going to be forced to actually increase their service offering and actually do a lot more contracting. I mean, a lot of what we do now is contract negotiation. So, and this is one of the other bugbears that I would personally like to put forward, is lack of flexibility with attrition terms, deposit terms, and having the ability to actually amend those based on a particular situation. And we actually managed to pick up a very sizable piece of business because they'd been trying to, a very large corporation had been trying to inflict their terms onto a particular venue that simply wouldn't budge. And as a result, they couldn't actually hold their event there because the venue wouldn't alter their terms to suit the terms of this big corporation. So it was to our gain, because we ended up by taking the event to the Guildhall, who were very flexible in their approach. So I think flexibility and being able to negotiate further to make sure that there's no wastage in terms of bedrooms, that there's a greater level of flexibility on attrition terms, deposit terms, and all these different elements that need to be included in those contracts is definitely something that most venue finding agencies will have to include as part of the service offering moving forwards.
And the rest of you had any problems with those kind of flexibilities?
I think contracting is always tricky. I've worked on the venue side and been that venue person saying, no, T's and C's are T's and C's, not going to change. So I kind of see both sides, and often it's not necessarily the terms aren't set necessarily by those teams, they're set by people further up the ranks, and I think it is tricky for them to be able to flex. However, that said, in my experiences, we did always try and kind of move the boundaries where possible. So, you know, things like payment terms, maybe you could be a little bit more flexible and put a plan together based on the timings that client is working to, or their kind of cash flow, providing you're going to get the money at the end of the day. So I think, you know, we do it in our business, we do contract on behalf of our clients, and we see the inflexibility there too. But I think it's, again, communication, being able to actually discuss the objectives of the client and what they need to achieve, and seeing if you can meet halfway.
There are situations where, on occasion, we find that we have one particular client that does a particular event in the same location year after year after year, because that particular location is best suited for this particular event. And if you're going to take a piece of business back to the same location over a course of 2 to 3 years, being able to do a deal of some kind where actually there's an incentive to stay in that location, whether it's a 5% discount, whether it's fixed rates for the next 3 years, whether it's, I don't know, throwing in your Wi-Fi for free, those types of things, it really makes a difference, because everybody is having to fight harder for business these days. Certainly in this climate, it's not as strong as it was 18 months ago. It's just not. There is, you know, the economy is still growing, but it has slowed down. So people are having to fight harder. And so having that level of flexibility and actually coming to the table without us having to say, okay, what can you do? What can you give us that's actually really going to make that difference for our client to want to come back to your location and to really feel the value offering, and so that the client feels that they're actually being valued by bringing their business to that particular location. It makes a huge difference.
I totally agree. I think trying to be innovative with the same space is really important as well, because we're constantly up against stakeholders that want new inventions of events that are annual, but don't want to necessarily move from the space, but want it to feel like a different event every year on year. So bringing to the table new and exciting ways that we can do that cost effectively is really good and key, I think.
So when you get a brief like that says, right, you know, this annual conference, we want it to be completely different to last year. We want it to have a new lease of life. We want it to, you know, to pop. Would you still consider the same, you know, if you hadn't been given a 3-year offer or some sort of, you know, incentives to stay with the venue, would you instantly disregard the venue that you'd gone to, or would you try to work with them? What would you prefer?
We'd go out to a series of venues. We would go back to the old venue as an option, but we'd want to shake it up in some sort of way, whether that be, you know, a completely new branding of the venue, whether it be that we haven't used all the spaces before or using the spaces in a different way, trying to shake up the format. That's what we would do to try and appease, you know, that brief. But yeah, we would also go and have a look at what else is out there as well.
So we've talked about the flexibility of costs and that relationship, but I guess there's also the flexibility of the actual space itself. You know, there's a trend for, you know, blank space and all of this and being able to just build and create something completely different. Is that something that you guys really prefer? You want a space that's really, really flexible, or do you like a venue that maybe has character and is what it is, like, say, Guildhall, for example, and then you just move around locations? What's your preference?
I mean, it completely depends on the brief. I mean, there's a very, very big, there's the buzzword in the industry, which is that every agency is experiential these days.
Yes.
And therefore, we're all trying to design something that is different from the next thing. We have a lot of clients that are doing product launches as well. So we are trying to create experiences which are very, very different. So, you know, the venue or the location that we would choose for that particular brief is very specific to that particular brief. Yes, we would always look at the same venue and put it forward if it's worked well and look at redesigning it. You know, but it needs to be very different from what it felt like the time before. So it's how to come up with those creative designs, which I'm sure Fisher Productions are, you know, specialists at. You know, so it's just being as dynamic and as creative as you can be to show that you've got your finger on the pulse.
I think restrictions are key as well. I was talking about this earlier. Sometimes, you know, you can add a lot to an event through catering, but sometimes you find yourself trapped in a preferred suppliers list when actually you'd like to maybe go elsewhere with your catering and slightly more experiential. So I think the less restrictions on a venue is sometimes the better for us personally. Again, with production suppliers, I know you were chatting about this earlier.
I guess it's really tricky for us in a way, because our agency is kind of half and half. We're both supplier and also agency. So we're really fortunate that we're accredited at about 50 venues across London, which in the vast majority of your historic venues, your kind of UVL type venues, which obviously have a lot of rules and regs because they are historic venues and they're often listed, and you know, you want to protect the fabric of those spaces. So we're really kind of, well, we're quite lucky, I suppose, that we get the opportunity to have access to those spaces. Understandably, some clients obviously aren't too keen to use off list because they have their own relationships. So we kind of toe both sides of the line, but on the flip side, there are venues where we can't work, so we have the same issue in the sense that we'll have a repeat client or someone we've worked with for a number of years, and then they want to move venue. If we're not accredited there, we run the risk of obviously losing that client. So I kind of see both sides of it, but I think certainly being able to be flexible in those venues, again, in terms of what you can achieve. I think pushing the boundaries within reason. I think a lot of the unique venues now are actually diversifying quite a lot. So looking at ways that they can use their spaces in a more interesting and dynamic way, rather than just doing your kind of bog standard receptions or dinners, which is actually really refreshing because it gives us the opportunity as a production agency to do more and be more creative, and obviously work with our clients on a more kind of exciting platform. So.
And then from a charity perspective, I guess, you know, everyone's very budget conscious, but you will be extra conscious on the cost side. So with those kind of spaces, is that a good thing for you?
So for us, I mean, a lot of the events that we do are quite traditional, and so for us often having like an approved supplier works for us because it can keep the costs down, and also in terms of making my life easier, it's a lot easier for me if I can just deal with one person at a venue and they can do the catering and they're the contact for everything. So that can sometimes make my life quite a lot easier. Yeah.
So I feel like there's some. I don't want it to feel like we're venue bashing, you know, because you know that's not what it's here. It's here. It's about to discuss kind of best practice. So, if you could like give an example of where it's really worked well. You've had this partnership, or maybe you've got an existing partnership with a venue, and it's worked really well. And then maybe some of the reasons why it works so well and why you have such a good relationship with that venue. So, if we start with you.
We have done, we've produced an event now for the last 2 years and potentially coming up for a third at a location called Pine Cliffs in the Algarve in Portugal, which is a big resort hotel, and we take 800 people there every year in September. It's a weekend away for a management consultancy that take their partners and children all away for a weekend. And, you know, it's quite complicated in terms of data management, which is going to become obviously even more complicated imminently. We do a lot of activities. We do off-site gala dinners. It's quite tricky. But what we have been able to do is engage with them on a 3-year deal on the contracting side, where they've not just fixed rates for us over a 2 to 3 year period of time, but they've actually given us a 5% discount year on year. So we're going back and we're actually saving money year on year, and we've actually entered into a memorandum of understanding with this particular client on a 3 to 4 year deal, where we manage their flagship events on a contractual basis, because we're then absolutely working 100% in their best interests. We are doing everything that we can to actually save them money on their bottom line. And we're really showing our value proposition to that particular client, that actually we're managing to save them money off their bottom line. When prices are inflating, we're actually saving them. So that's really made a big difference to that particular client, and that's how we hope to retain those relationships with our client base.
I suppose for us, we have lots of really strong relationships with our venues, and I think rather than singling people out, I think working with a number of our key venues where we are accredited actually works really well for us and for our clients, on the basis that we know the venues inside out from a kind of rules and regulations, restrictions side of things. We are able to kind of advise our clients the best way to kind of maximise their budgets within those spaces. And I think obviously going back to the positives of having an accredited list is that we are best placed to advise our clients in terms of what you can do within those usually quite tricky places. I think for us also, HRP as a group, I think are really great. I think they're changing the way that they work in terms of being attractive to various different markets. They allow us to go in there and kind of really look at different ways of developing kind of, I suppose, our client's brief into something that's completely different than what they've done before. They're not scared to kind of push the boundaries, which in extremely historic venues, I'm sure it's obviously quite rare. So I think, again, any venues where we've got these kind of really strong working relationships where we can almost be an extension to their team and given the opportunity to kind of advise. And, you know, it's really hard from a production perspective. We're not expecting all those venues to know exactly how best to build a stage, or, you know, what power is needed for certain elements of our kit, but that's why we're there to advise, and we'd like to be brought in as soon as possible to kind of help wherever we can.
I think an example for us is an event called the Formats Festival, which is basically an event for around 150 international format buyers that takes place once a year at the Ham Yard Hotel. And that particular relationship has really flourished over the last sort of 3 years that it's been at that venue, purely because we want to reinvent the event year on year, and Ham Yard have worked with us really closely to do that, and have really, you know, put forward ideas and taken our event briefs and given us a real bespoke sort of proposal back. We have looked at alternative venues, but we've stayed with Ham Yard because cost effectiveness, and we've really developed that relationship so well. So that's a really great example, I think, when they've actually got involved in that creative process with us, so it feels like, you know, a real collaborative effort.
So for me, an example would be Banqueting House from the historic Royal Palaces. From the very beginning, they were really transparent about their costs and what was possible and what wasn't, the capacities. So yeah, from start to finish, it was just they were just really good to work with, very open, very on it, yeah. And yes, they were really good, and they were really open to all of the ideas that we had in terms of the entertainment and things. There was nothing that really seemed off limits, so that was good.
I guess I think the overall theme or the crux of everything that's been said today is that it's transparency from the beginning, being open and honest, having a really collaborative relationship where you're partnering from the very beginning, and then just working with each other to, you know, if there's something you don't know, this is what we don't know, but this is how we can do it, and having that flexibility both with space and with pricing and contracts and stuff like that. So just before we wrap up, is there anything else that's burning inside you that you want to kind of tell the world of venues that are listening? Yes, there is. Yes.
No, I was just going to mention sustainability, because I think all of us have mentioned this earlier, but we are doing a massive push, I know, in our team, and you know, the more upfront you can be around what the sustainability policies are, food wastage in particular, you know, what happens to the food wastage, that's really key for us, and will go in our favour, I think.
Cool.
And then just a key consideration for me when I'm choosing a venue is making sure that it aligns with the charity's beliefs and their core values. So for us, inclusivity is a massive deal breaker, really. If the venue is not inclusive and not got disabled access or potential for a hearing loop or something, then it would be that would put us off using you.
So all of the money side of things, but also the morality as well, so balancing the two. Okay, well, thank you very much to our panellists. Please give them a big round of applause.